The road narrowed as she drove north, the trees pressing closer until the asphalt was just a ribbon between walls of pine. Alara had been driving for 4 hours, and the GPS had stopped giving directions 20 minutes back. There was no cell service out here, just the road and the trees and the gray December sky pressing low over the green mountains. She'd grown up coming to this cabin, every summer until she was 12, when her parents divorced and the visits stopped. She hadn't been back in 23 years, but her mother had kept it. Had kept everything, apparently, because the will said the cabin and everything in it went to Alara, and Alara had driven up here with a suitcase and a duffel and the vague, desperate hope that maybe, somewhere in these mountains, she could remember how to sleep. The cabin appeared around a bend like it had been waiting. A small A-frame with a steep roof and a stone chimney, tucked between 2 enormous hemlocks. The porch sagged a little. The windows were dark, but there was smoke already coming from the chimney, thin and gray, and Alara frowned because she hadn't asked anyone to light a fire. She parked behind the cabin, next to a woodpile that looked freshly split, and got out. The air hit her first, cold and sharp and clean, nothing like Boston's thick, exhaust-heavy winter. It filled her lungs and made her feel for the first time in months like she was actually breathing. The key was under the 3rd flower pot by the door, just like her mother had always said. The door stuck, then gave, and the warmth of the cabin wrapped around her like a blanket. Someone had been here. The fire was going in the stone fireplace, low and steady. The kettle was on the wood stove, warm to the touch. A note was propped against the coffee pot, in handwriting she didn't recognize. Marge sent word you were coming. Got the fire started. Wood's by the door. Help yourself to anything in the pantry. Sis. She didn't know an S. But the fire was warm, and the kettle was warm, and she was too tired to wonder. She set her bags down and walked through the cabin. It was smaller than she remembered. A main room with the fireplace and a kitchen nook. A bedroom through a door on the left. A ladder to a loft above. The furniture was old but clean. A plaid couch, a wooden table with 2 chairs, bookshelves lining one wall, filled with her mother's books. The same books, she realized, running her fingers along the spines. The same worn paperbacks, the same dog-eared mysteries, the same collection of poetry her mother had read aloud on rainy summer afternoons. She made tea, chamomile, from a tin in the pantry that was still good, and carried it to the couch. The fire popped and settled. Outside, the light was fading, the gray sky turning to blue, and then to the deep purple of early winter dusk, and then it started to snow. Not the wet, slushy snow of Boston, but real snow, dry, quiet, falling in slow, heavy flakes that seemed to hang in the air before settling on the pine branches. Alara watched it through the window, her tea warming her hands, and felt something in her chest loosen, just a little, just enough. She found the diary on the bookshelf, tucked between a cookbook and a field guide to Vermont birds. It was a leather-bound journal, the cover soft with age, and when she opened it, her mother's handwriting looked back at her. Smaller than she remembered. More careful. The first entry was dated 15 years ago. December 3rd. First snow of the season. I came up here alone this time. Alara's in college, busy with her life, and I don't blame her. This place was always too quiet for a teenager, but I need the quiet now. The city is too loud. I can't hear myself think there. Here I can hear the snow. I can hear the fire. I can hear whatever it is I've been trying not to listen to. Alara closed the journal. She set it on the table next to her tea. The fire crackled. The snow fell. Somewhere outside, an owl called, low and soft, and then was silent. She leaned back against the couch. Her eyes were heavy. She told herself she was just resting them, just for a minute, just while the fire did its work, and the snow did its work, and the quiet did its work. She didn't remember closing them. When she woke, the fire had burned down to embers, and the room was dark except for the glow of the coals and the blue-white light of snow reflecting through the window. Her tea was cold. The diary was still on the table, and she had slept, deeply, dreamlessly, for 3 hours, for the first time in longer than she could remember. Alara sat up slowly. She looked at the window, at the snow still falling, at the dark shapes of the hemlocks against the night sky. She didn't know how long she would stay. She didn't know if the quiet would hold. But for tonight, for this first night in her mother's cabin in the mountains, she had slept. That was enough. She woke to silence. Not the city silence, the thin, strained quiet of apartment walls and distant traffic, but real silence, the kind that has weight, that settles over everything like the snow outside. Alara lay in the bedroom, which she'd found the night before after waking on the couch, and listened. There was nothing. No sirens, no footsteps, no voices through the wall. Just the faint pop of the last embers in the fireplace and, somewhere far off, the creak of a pine branch settling under its load of snow. She got up and made coffee. The kitchen was tiny, a wood stove, a sink, a counter barely wide enough for 2 cutting boards. But it worked. The coffee was dark and bitter, just how her mother had liked it. And Alara drank it standing by the window, looking out at a world turned entirely white. The diary was on the table where she'd left it. She flipped to the next entry while the coffee warmed her hands. December 5th. The man from down the valley brought wood today. Silas. Quiet boy. Used to play the cello, or so Marge says. Hands like a musician, even now. He fixed the kitchen faucet while he was here. Wouldn't take money for it. I think he likes having something to fix. I think we all do, in our own way. Alara set the diary down. Silas, the S from the note. A musician. She was turning this over in her mind when she heard it. The low rumble of a truck engine coming up the road, slow and careful on the snow. She pulled on her boots and coat and went outside. The truck was an old Ford, blue, the bed loaded with split oak and maple. The man driving it was tall, with dark hair going gray at the temples and a beard trimmed close to his jaw. He was wearing a flannel under a canvas jacket, and when he got out, she saw his left hand, the knuckles thick with old scar tissue, the fingers slightly curved, like they couldn't quite straighten all the way. "Alara," he said. His voice was low and warm, like wood smoke. "I'm Silas. Marge said you'd be needing wood. Brought a cord and a half. Should get you through the next cold snap. Thank you. For everything. The fire, the note." He waved it off. "Marge called. I was already in the area. No trouble." He started unloading the wood, stacking it neatly by the porch, and Alara found herself watching the way he moved. Efficient. Unhurried, his right hand doing most of the work, his left curling around the logs to steady them. "You want this inside, or you good with it here?" "Here is fine." Would you like some coffee? It's just instant, but instant's fine." He came inside, wiping his boots on the mat, and stood by the fireplace while she poured 2 mugs. He didn't sit down right away. He looked at the bookshelves, at the diary on the table, at the window with its view of the snow. He had the careful stillness of someone who was used to being alone in rooms and didn't want to disturb them. "Your mother was a good woman," he said, finally sitting in the chair by the fire. "She let me use her workshop once when I first moved up here. My own place wasn't finished. She never asked for anything in return. She was like that." Alara sat on the couch, mug in her hands. "Marge said you used to play the cello." Silas looked at his left hand. He turned it over, looked at the scars, then set it on his knee. "Used to, a long time ago. What happened?" He was quiet for a moment. The fire popped. Outside, a bird called, a chickadee high and clear. "Car accident. 6 years ago. Nerve damage in the left hand. Can't finger the strings anymore." He said it simply. No drama. Like he was talking about a broken appliance. "Some days are better than others. Most days I don't think about it. Some days I do." Alara thought about her own thing. The insomnia. The way her mind wouldn't stop. The way she'd lain awake in Boston for 3 years, listening to the city and feeling like she was drowning in noise. "I know what that's like," she said. "The thing that doesn't go away." Silas looked at her. Really looked, like he was seeing past the tired eyes and the coat that was too warm for indoors. "What's yours?" She almost didn't answer. She almost said it was nothing, that she was fine, that she was just here for a visit. But the cabin was quiet, and the fire was warm, and this man had scars on his hand and didn't pretend they weren't there. "I can't sleep," she said. "Haven't, not really, in years. I came here because my mother could. Because the diary said she could hear the snow here, and I wanted to hear it too." Silas nodded. He didn't say it would get better. He didn't say he understood. He just said, "The snow's loudest at night, when everything else stops. You'll hear it." They sat like that for a while, drinking coffee, watching the fire. He told her about the valley, the best trails for snowshoeing, the stream that didn't freeze even in January, the way the light hit the mountains at 4 p.m. She told him about the library, about the old man who came in every Tuesday to read the newspaper, about the way Boston smelled in summer. Neither of them said anything heavy. Neither of them had to. When he left, he paused at the door. "There's a loose step on the porch. I'll fix it next time I'm up. And if the fire goes out and you can't get it started, call Marge. She'll reach me. No cell service up here, but she's got the radio." "Thank you, Silas." He nodded. He was almost to his truck when she called after him. "You said the snow's loudest at night. How do you know?" He turned. For a second, he almost smiled. "Because I'm usually awake to hear it." He drove off, the truck's tires crunching on the snow, and Alara stood on the porch until the sound faded. Then she went inside, picked up the diary, and wrote her own entry on the first blank page after her mother's last. December 4th. The woodman came. His name is Silas. He has scars on his left hand, and he doesn't pretend they're not there. I told him I can't sleep. He didn't say it would get better. He just said I'd hear the snow at night. I think I believe him. She set the pen down. Outside, the sky was already starting to dim, the blue deepening toward evening, and somewhere in the back of her mind, quiet and unhurried, was the thought that she hoped he came back soon. The storm came in on a Tuesday, the way storms do in the mountains. Slow at first, then all at once. Alara had been at the cabin for a week. She'd slept every night, not always through the night, but more than she had in years. She'd read half the books on the shelves, written 3 entries in the diary, and learned to start a fire without burning her fingers. Silas had come twice more, once to fix the porch step, once to bring soup from Marge, and each time he left, the cabin felt a little quieter, a little emptier. He showed up Tuesday morning with his truck loaded with supplies, just as the sky turned the particular shade of green-gray that meant trouble. "Big one coming," he said, carrying boxes inside. "Marge says 2, maybe 3 days. Roads'll be closed. I brought extra wood, food, candles. You'll be fine. You're not staying?" Alara said it before she could stop herself. Silas looked at her, then at the window, where the first flakes were already starting to fly sideways. "Road's probably already bad down at the bottom. Might be smarter if I did." He stayed. The first day was mostly quiet. They stoked the fire, cooked soup on the wood stove, watched the snow pile up against the windows. The wind started in the afternoon, low at first, a murmur through the pines, then a howl that shook the cabin windows and made the chimney rattle. Silas checked the roof from the attic, said it was fine, and they settled in for the long wait. That night, they sat by the fire and played cards, an old deck her mother had kept, the edges soft from years of use. Silas won most hands. He didn't gloat. He just smiled, that almost smile of his, and dealt another round. The second day, the storm was at its worst. They couldn't see the hemlocks through the snow. The wind was a living thing, throwing itself against the cabin, and once, in the middle of the afternoon, a branch came down somewhere close with a sound like a gunshot. They both jumped. Then Silas laughed, a low, surprised sound, and Alara laughed too, and suddenly the cabin felt smaller, warmer, like they were in on a secret together. That night, they talked. Not the light, careful talk of before. The real kind. The kind that only happens when there's no escape, no reason to protect yourself from the silence. Alara told him about her mother's last months, about the way the hospital had been so loud, so bright, so full of machines that beeped and hummed and never let anyone rest. About how after the funeral, she'd gone back to Boston and lain in her apartment for 3 days, listening to the traffic, and realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt quiet inside. "I thought if I came here, she said, staring at the fire. If I sat in her cabin and read her books and slept in her bed, that maybe some of her quiet would rub off on me, that maybe I'd stop feeling like I was waiting for something I couldn't name. Did it? Silas said. Some, not all. She looked at him. What about you? What are you waiting for? He was quiet for a long time. The fire popped. The wind screamed around the eaves. I'm waiting to stop missing it, he said finally. The cello. The music. I played for 20 years. It was the only thing I was ever really good at. And then one morning I woke up and my hand wouldn't do what I told it to, and that was it. Gone. He flexed his left hand, the fingers curving and straightening. Curving and straightening. I make things now. Tables, chairs, bowls. It's not the same. But it's something. Do you ever play? Even just a little? No, he said it flatly. Can't. Tried once 6 months after the accident. Couldn't get through a scale. Put the bow down and never picked it up again. Alara wanted to say something. That it wasn't too late. That he could try again. That music wasn't just in the hands. But she knew that some grief didn't need fixing. It just needed to be sat with. So she didn't say anything. She just sat there next to him, watching the fire, and let the silence be enough. The third day, the storm broke. They woke to a world transformed. The snow up to the windowsills. The sky a brilliant, impossible blue. The pines bowed under their loads of white. The wind was gone. In its place was a silence so complete it felt like holding your breath. Silas made coffee. Alara opened the door and stepped outside. The snow was up to her knees, cold and crisp, and when she breathed in, it hurt in the best way, sharp and clean and alive. She stood there, in her mother's coat, in her mother's boots, and listened to the mountains breathe. Behind her, she heard Silas come to the door. She didn't turn around. She just said, I slept last night. All the way through, didn't even wake up once. Me too, he said. She turned. He was leaning against the doorframe, coffee in hand, the morning light on his face. He looked lighter somehow, like the storm had taken something with it when it left. 3 days, she said. We survived. We did. He paused. Road'll be plowed by tomorrow, probably. I can head out then. Alara looked at the snow, at the mountains, at the cabin with its smoking chimney. You don't have to rush, she said. There's still soup. And cards. And the fire's going. Silas looked at her. And this time he didn't almost smile. He did smile, fully, warmly, the kind of smile that changed his whole face. I'd like that, he said. They went back inside. The door closed. The fire crackled. Somewhere a bird started to sing. The solstice came on a clear, cold night. Alara had read about it in her mother's diary that morning, an entry from 10 years ago. December 21st, longest night of the year. I walked up to the old shed in the woods today, the one behind the stone wall. I go there sometimes, when the quiet gets too loud or not loud enough. There's something in there I haven't looked at in 30 years. Maybe tonight I will. Maybe tonight I won't. The longest night is good for not deciding. Alara had put the diary down and looked out the window. The sun was already low, even though it was barely 3 in the afternoon. Silas was outside, chopping wood, his breath white in the cold. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm since the storm. He'd stayed 3 extra days, then gone home, then come back the next morning with more wood and a loaf of Marge's bread. They didn't talk about what was happening. They just let it happen. But that afternoon, while Silas was down at his own place, Alara pulled on her boots and her coat and walked into the woods. She found the stone wall easily. Her mother had mentioned it, and the snow had settled on the stones in a way that made them visible, a long, low line of gray and white. Behind it, half buried in snow and vines, was the shed, small, wooden, the roof sagging, the door hanging crooked on one hinge. Alara pulled the door open. It groaned. Inside, the air was cold and still, and smelled like pine resin and old wood. There were a few rusted tools, a stack of firewood, and in the corner, covered by a tarp, something long and hard. She pulled the tarp off, a cello case. Old, black, The leather cracked at the corners. She unlatched it. Inside, wrapped in a wool blanket, was a cello. Not a fine one, not by any means, but solid. The wood a warm amber color, the strings dull with age. Taped to the inside of the case was an envelope. Her mother's handwriting on the front, "For whoever finds this on the longest night." Ilara's hands were shaking as she opened it. "If you're reading this, you found my cello." "Yes, I played. Briefly. Badly. I was 19, in love with a boy who played violin, and I thought if I learned an instrument we'd have something to talk about. He left. I kept the cello for a while, then put it here. I couldn't bring myself to get rid of it. It felt like getting rid of the girl I was before I became a wife and a mother and a librarian and all the other things that fit better. I'm writing this because I think someone might need it someday. Someone who gave up on something and isn't sure they can go back. If that's you, don't be afraid. The strings will be rusty. The bow will need rosin. But the wood remembers. It always remembers." Ilara sat down in the snow beside the shed, the letter in her lap, the cello case open beside her. The light was fading fast. The sky was turning that deep, clear blue that only comes on the coldest nights, and the first stars were coming out, bright and sharp and close enough to touch. She didn't hear him coming. She never did. The snow swallowed footsteps, but suddenly there was a lantern glow, and Silas was standing there, his coat dusted with snow, his face concerned. "I went up to the cabin and you were gone," he said. The door was open. "I thought I found it," Ilara said. She held up the letter. "My mother's cello. She hid it out here. 30 years. Silas set the lantern down and knelt beside her. He looked at the cello. His breath caught. She saw his left hand twitch, just slightly, the fingers curling toward the strings and then stopping, like they remembered what they weren't supposed to do. She wanted someone to play it, Ilara said. Someone who gave up on something. Silas didn't say anything. He reached out with his right hand and touched the neck of the cello, gently, like you'd touch the shoulder of someone who'd been asleep a long time. Then slowly he picked up the bow. It was old, the hair thin, but it would do. He settled the cello between his knees, awkwardly, carefully, his left hand hovering over the fingerboard. He drew the bow across the open strings. The sound was raw and imperfect. The strings were old. The tuning was off. The cabin of the cello was cold and hadn't vibrated in decades. But it was sound. It was music. It hung in the cold air, low and warm and alive, and Ilara felt something move in her chest, something that had been still for a very long time. Silas played 3 notes. Just 3. Then he stopped. His hand was shaking. He set the bow down and looked at her, and his eyes were bright, and he didn't say anything because he didn't have to. Ilara reached over and covered his left hand with hers. His fingers were cold, the scars rough against her palm. "The wood remembers," she said, quoting her mother's letter. He turned his hand over and laced his fingers through hers. They sat there in the snow, in the lantern light, under the longest night sky, while the cello sat open between them like a promise. "Let's take it home," Silas said. They carried it back through the woods. Silas with the case, Ilara with the lantern, their boots crunching in the snow. The cabin was warm when they got there, the fire still going, and they set the cello by the fireplace where the wood could warm up, where the sound could come back. That night, Ilara lay in bed and listened to the silence. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of the memory of 3 imperfect notes, full of the weight of a man's hand in hers, full of the quiet certainty that something had shifted, irreversibly, on the longest night of the year. She didn't know what would happen when the snow melted. She didn't know if she'd go back to Boston or stay. She didn't know if Silas would ever play a full song, or if she'd ever sleep through a whole week without waking. But she knew that the wood remembered. And so did she. She closed her eyes. And somewhere in the cabin, in the dark, the cello warmed itself by the fire and waited. The snow started to melt in March. It happened slowly, the way all important things do. A drip from the eaves at noon, a patch of brown grass by the porch. The sound of the stream down the valley growing louder each morning until it was a constant rushing hum. Ilara stood at the kitchen window one morning, coffee in hand, and watched a piece of snow slide off the roof and land in the yard with a soft, heavy thud. Spring was coming. She wasn't sure she was ready. She'd been at the cabin for 3 months. 3 months of fires and snow and silence, of Silas's truck coming up the road too, 3 times a week, of the cello by the fireplace, its strings slowly coming back to life under his careful, imperfect fingers. He played for 10 minutes each morning, his left hand slow and stiff but determined. And by March, he could get through a scale without stopping. It wasn't beautiful. It was better than beautiful. It was becoming. The email came on a Tuesday. Her old supervisor at the Boston Public Library, the senior position she'd applied for before her mother died. It was open again. They wanted her to interview. Full-time. Benefits. A corner office with a view of Boylston Street. Alara read the email 3 times. Then she closed her laptop and went outside. The air was warm enough that she didn't need her coat. Just a sweater, the one her mother had left in the closet, soft and a little too big. She walked to the stone wall and sat on it, the snow melting around her boots, and thought about Boston. The noise, the sirens, the way the city never let you breathe, never let you be still. She thought about the apartment she'd sublet, the one with the thin walls and the neighbor who played television at 2 a.m. She thought about 3 years of lying awake, listening to the world refuse to be quiet. And she thought about the cabin. The fireplace, the cello, Silas's hands, scarred and careful, learning to make music again. The way she'd slept, night after night, deeply and without effort, for the first time in years. She didn't go back inside for an hour. When she did, Silas was there. He'd let himself in. She'd given him a key in February, after he'd shown up in a rainstorm with a broken window he'd fixed before she even woke up. He was standing by the fireplace, the cello in his hands, playing something slow and simple, a Bach minuet he'd been working on for weeks. His left hand moved stiffly, missing a note here and there, but the melody was there, low and warm, filling the cabin like sunlight. He stopped when he heard her. "Boston?" he said, because she'd told him about the email, because she told him everything now. "Boston," she said. He set the cello down. He didn't tell her to stay. He didn't tell her to go. He just looked at her, his gray eyes steady, and said, "What do you want?" It was the question she'd been avoiding, not what was practical, not what was safe, what she wanted. "I want to keep this," she said, gesturing at the cabin, at the cello, at him. "But I don't want to hide. I spent 3 years hiding in Boston, and then 3 months hiding here. I want to take the quiet with me. Wherever I go." Silas nodded. He thought about it for a moment. Then he said, "The library in Burlington is hiring, part-time. Marge mentioned it. You could do that. Keep the cabin. Come to Boston when you need to. Or don't. The point isn't the place. The point is you're not running anymore." Alara looked at him, at the man who'd brought her wood and fixed her steps and played 3 broken notes on a cello in the snow because she'd asked him to, at the life she'd built in 3 months, slow and careful, like a fire that started with 1 match. She walked to the laptop. She wrote back to her supervisor, "Thank you, but I'm not coming back. I found something here. I'm not sure what it is yet, but I'm staying to find out." She hit send. Then she closed the laptop and turned around. Silas was standing by the fireplace, and he was smiling, and the cello was between them, and the afternoon light was coming through the window, golden and warm. That night they sat on the porch. The snow was dripping from the eaves. The stream was rushing. Somewhere a bird was singing, an early robin, confused and happy. Alara leaned her head on Silas's shoulder, and he put his arm around her, and they didn't say anything because they didn't need to. She fell asleep there, on the porch, in the March air, with the sound of melting snow and a man's steady breathing in the quiet, certain knowledge that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not because the cabin was magic, not because the mountains were quieter than the city, but because she'd finally learned how to be still, how to listen, how to let the silence in instead of fighting it. The wood remembered. And so did she.